this lesson, we're going to talk about different tools to have when using watercolor. You really don't need a lot, and even the things that I'm going to show you, you really don't need to go out and buy. I am going to show you lessons using masking fluid, a sea sponge. You don't necessarily need unless you are very serious about exploring watercolor as your primary medium. And even though I'm going to show you how to use these in certain lessons, you can find ways to improvise with what you have at home. So let's move some of this off so I can talk about the paper here. All you need is one pad of watercolor paper. Now, I have the hot press watercolor paper. This is an 8x10, and it is a smooth surface, and I really like that. Some people don't like the hot press because it could buckle up on you, wrinkle a little bit, but sometimes so does the cold press watercolor paper, and this is cold press. I will probably do most of my stuff in the cold press. And the difference between them is that the cold press watercolor paper, I'm going to pull you in tight. See this? It has this texture on it, and it's very good for absorbing the watercolor paints. So that's the main difference, and you can choose which one you want to use. I'm going to use this one because I have more of it, and because it's a 9x12, it's bigger. I may switch over to do some of our projects on an 8x10 on this hot press, but I don't know. We'll just play it by ear. So you're going to need a watercolor pad in addition to whichever watercolor paints you choose. And also very important, you need paintbrushes. I will probably stick to 2 or 3 different watercolor brushes at the most, but I wanted to go over them with you just to give you an idea of what the different brushes are. So basically you could get a set at the store or off Amazon that has a lot of these different shapes and sizes in it. But I tell you what, I'm probably only going to use a couple of my round pointed ones and maybe a flat one. I don't know, it just depends on which piece we're doing at the time. I'm going to show you how to use some of these other brushes, but you really only need 2 or 3 or 4 that you like. My favorite, and these are a little bit more expensive, are the silver black velvet brushes. And I've got, let's see, I've got, all of these are round and round pointed. I've got a number 12, an 8, I've got 2 8s, a 6 and a 4. And I just like the way they soak up the water and how they're pointed, kind of like a calligraphy brush on the tips of them. And I also have, this is the same manufacturer, and it's a script brush. You see how tiny the bristles are on this brush. So I like these, but I do not recommend you to buy these because they're very expensive. You could get, I think you can get these My Artscape, or even these Simply Simons are pretty decent brushes, and you can get them in a nice pack for maybe $5 or $10 depending on where you buy them and if you have a coupon to use. So you definitely want a round or a pointed round. Here's another round. This one is not pointed, it's more blunt on the end. So you're going to want that. And then a flat brush. This is a wash. And then this one is a flat brush, but it's called a bright. And I'm sorry to say that I don't take very good care of my brushes. In fact, I'm pretty pathetic at taking care of them. I'm ashamed to admit it to you, but there you have it. The difference between these, they're both 1/2 inches, is the bright is just shorter, and this one is longer. This one is about a little over a ½ inch in length, and this is about a ¼ inch in length. So you just want something with a flat end. It can be a flat brush or a bright. Then I never, ever, ever, maybe once or twice have used the fan brush, and it usually comes in every set, and it's good for feathering. So if you want to try that, and if your set has it, then we'll do it. Then also, this is another script brush. No, this one says it's a rigger. It's good for long, thin lines. And then these are some of my favorites. I love the angled shader and the filbert. The filbert has the rounded edges, and then the angled shader is a flat, but obviously it's flat on an angle. You don't need all these, so please don't feel like you have to go out and buy them. I just happen to have lots of brushes simply because I keep ruining all my other ones and I have to go buy more. So there's that. All right, if you're going to use tube paints, then you're going to want a palette. And the palette that I use is one that I can open and close. And I actually, it may not look like it, but I did clean it out for you because it was really disgusting. And I threw away all the old paint because it was really hard. And I'm going to show you in the next lesson how to set up a palette. So this one actually needed to be cleaned so that I could show you that. You don't have to have one of these palettes. You can get the plastic ones that are round, kind of like this. This one is a porcelain one, and I like the small size of this. I use it with my gouaches, but they make them about, about this size for around $1 or $2. You can get them at Michael's or Hobby Lobby or even off Amazon. So that's only if you're going to use tube paints or gouache. You're going to need the palette. Some other fun things to have on hand are a sea sponge. We're going to play around with some texturing with the sea sponge, or plastic wrap. This is a neat way to texturize watercolors. Some Q-tips, or cotton buds as the British call them. And a gift card that you can actually cut up. And also make sure you have some paper towels with you always, because you're going to want to wipe up your brushes, dry them off. You're going to want to pick up some extra drips off your paper. Paper towels are your best friend when you're working with watercolors. Let's get these out of the way. Also, some sort of artist tape. This is painter's tape that you can get at Home Depot or Lowe's. This is artist tape. I actually prefer using painter's tape over the artist tape. It doesn't seem, this one sometimes will tear my papers when I'm pulling it off, but it's thinner, so it comes in handy. It's only like a ½ inch thick, maybe not even that. This is about 1 inch thick. So if you don't have painter's tape or artist tape, then you can grab a roll of masking tape. And I'll show you when we use it, I'll show you how to make it so that the masking tape doesn't rip your paper. That's important. If you're pulling it off, you do not want to rip your paper. And also, you might want to check out masking fluid. And this will be something that you actually, it's a plastic, a liquid plastic that you put down over your paper before you begin to watercolor. And you just mask off the areas that you don't want to absorb watercolor. And at the very end, when all your paints are dry, you just peel off the masking fluid because it dries into a plastic. You peel it off, and then you have these beautiful white areas that can be clouds or white caps or whatever you need to be white if you don't want to use white or leave the white space on your watercolor paper. And then also, you're going to want some sort of salt. You can use table salt, but I'm going to use kosher salt because it's got bigger granules and they're not all the same size. Like table salt is all basically the same size, but the kosher salt, you get cooler textures from it. So grab you some of that. I forgot to mention two important things that we're going to need that we're going to play around with in some of our lessons. You need either an oil pastel or crayon or even a broken candle because we're going to do a wax resist, and then also an old toothbrush, or just get you a cheap dollar toothbrush at the dollar store because we're going to do some spattering techniques with it. So don't forget these two supplies, and I'll see you in the next lesson.